Always a bride, never a wife. I am 79 years old and I never had a husband. People are always surprised when they hear that. They look at me with big eyes and ask, "Why, Laila? How can a woman live her whole life without marrying?" I smile when they ask. Sometimes I laugh. But deep inside, I know it is not a simple question. It is a long story. And today I want to tell it. Maybe you will understand. Maybe you will even see yourself in my story. I was born in a small town. Life there was simple. People worked hard, children played outside, and families lived close to each other. Everyone knew everyone. When I was a little girl, I believed that my life would be like all the others. I thought I would finish school, meet a man, get married, have children, and then grow old with grandchildren around me. That was the picture I had in my mind. That was what society expected. But life, as I learned, does not always follow the plan we make in our heads. When I was young, I was shy but curious. I loved books more than I loved parties. While other girls in my town liked to talk about dresses and weddings, I liked to sit with a story in my hands and dream about faraway places. Sometimes people said I was strange because I did not hurry to talk about boys. But of course, even I was not free from love. The first time I felt something for a boy, I was 15 years old. His name was Omar. He was tall with dark hair and kind eyes. He lived near my house and we often met on the way to school. At first, we only said hello. But slowly we began to talk more. He told me about his dream to become a doctor. I told him about my love for reading. We were young, but when he smiled at me, my heart beat faster. I thought, maybe he will be the one. One afternoon he walked me home. We stopped by the river near the town. The water moved slowly, and the sun painted the sky orange. Omar looked at me and said, "Laila, when we grow up, maybe we can build a life together." My face turned red, and I did not know what to answer. I only nodded. In that moment I felt so happy. But happiness, I would learn many times, can be very short. Only a few months later, Omar's father found a job in another city, and his whole family moved away. One day he was there, and the next he was gone. We tried to write letters, but after a while the letters stopped coming. I cried at night, but I was too young to fight for love. My first story of love ended quietly with distance and silence. After Omar, I thought maybe love was not for me. But of course, life always brings new faces. When I finished school, I went to the city to study. It was the first time I lived away from home. The city was big, loud, and full of energy. I was excited but also scared. There I met Kareem. He was older than me, confident and full of jokes. He made everyone laugh, and when he looked at me, I felt like the only person in the room. He was not like Omar, who was soft and kind. Kareem was strong, direct, and bold. First, I liked his attention. He invited me to the cinema, to small cafes, to walk under the city lights. I felt special. But soon I noticed things that did not feel right. Kareem wanted me to spend all my time with him. If I wanted to study in the library, he became angry. If I wanted to meet other friends, he was jealous. First, I thought this was love. I thought maybe this was how men show they care. But the more time passed, the more I felt trapped. One evening he said, "You don't need to study so much. You will marry me, and I will take care of everything." His words shocked me. I wanted to learn, to read, to see the world. I did not want my whole life to be only cooking and cleaning. I respected women who chose that, but it was not for me. So one day I told Kareem it was over. He did not take it well. He shouted. He accused me of not loving him. But I stayed strong. I walked away. It was painful, but I knew it was the right choice. And so another story ended. People around me began to talk. "Laila, you are too picky," they said. "You cannot wait forever. Men are not perfect." Maybe they were right, but my heart told me I needed something more. I did not want to marry only because society told me to. I wanted love, real love. Years passed and I met other men. Some were kind, some were selfish, some were funny, and some were boring. But with each one I discovered a truth. None of them felt like the right person for me. Sometimes I ended the story. Sometimes they did. There was one man, Yusuf, who loved me deeply. He was gentle and patient. My family liked him, my friends liked him. Everyone said, "Laila, marry him, he is perfect." But my heart did not agree. I tried to imagine myself spending every day of my life with him, and I felt empty. It was not his fault. He was a good man. But love cannot be forced. By the time I reached 30, many of my friends were already married with children. At weddings, people looked at me with pity. They whispered, "Poor Laila, still alone." Some tried to introduce me to cousins or neighbors. I smiled, I thanked them, but inside I felt tired of explaining. I was not poor. I was not broken. I just had not found my person. Looking back, I think those early years were very important. They taught me what I wanted and what I could not accept. I learned that love without freedom is not love. I learned that sometimes people leave and we must let them go. And I learned that it is better to be alone than to be with the wrong person. Still, I cannot lie. There were nights when I cried into my pillow, wondering if I was making a mistake. There were days when I watched mothers with their children and felt a sharp pain in my heart. Life without a husband was not an easy choice. Sometimes it was not a choice at all, it was simply how things turned out. But this was only the beginning of my story. Many more years, many more men, and many more lessons were waiting for me. Now, at 79, I can see the whole picture. But back then, I was just a young woman trying to find her way. And so, my journey continued. After my early years, life began to change quickly. By the time I turned 21, I was no longer the shy girl from a small town. I was living in the city, studying, working part-time, and trying to build a future for myself. I felt stronger and more confident, but I also carried the question that followed me everywhere. When will you marry, Laila? It seemed that people could not imagine a woman living without a husband. At family gatherings, older women asked me about nice young men. At weddings, my relatives teased me and said, "You are next, Laila, get ready." I always smiled politely, but inside I wanted to shout that marriage was not the only dream in life. Still, I did want love. I wanted a partner who respected me, who understood me, who did not try to change me. And so when new men came into my life, I tried to give them a chance. When I was 22, I met Sammy. He was a teacher at the same language school where I worked part-time. Sammy was not the most handsome man, but he was kind, responsible, and serious about life. He liked poetry, and sometimes he wrote little verses for me. I remember one line, "Your smile is brighter than the morning sun." After only 6 months of knowing each other, he surprised me one evening. We were walking in the park and suddenly he stopped, looked straight into my eyes and said, "Laila, I want you to be my wife. Will you marry me?" My heart jumped. It was the first time in my life that someone asked me such a question. For a moment I imagined myself as a bride, walking down the aisle wearing a white dress, with my parents smiling proudly. But then another picture came into my mind. Me sitting at home, cooking dinner every day, raising children and putting away my books and dreams. Sammy was sweet, but he wanted a traditional wife. He believed women should stay at home and men should make the decisions. I knew I could never be happy in that life. So I took a deep breath and said gently, "Sammy, you are a good man, but I cannot marry you. I want something different." His face fell. He was hurt and I felt guilty. But in my heart, I knew the truth. Saying yes would have been easier, but it would not have been honest. A few years later, I met another man and his name was Majid. He was an artist full of dreams and ideas. He painted the world in colors I had never seen before. When I was with him, I felt alive, excited, ready to see life as a great adventure. We spent hours walking through galleries, sitting in small cafes, talking about the meaning of life. He told me I inspired him and he painted my portrait more than once. My friends joked that I had finally found my soulmate. One evening Majid took my hand and whispered, "Laila, let us get married. Together we will live a life of beauty and freedom." It sounded romantic, but behind his words I saw danger. Majid had no stable job, no clear plan. He often borrowed money and promised to pay later. He loved art, but he did not love responsibility. I imagined myself living with him. Bills unpaid, empty cupboards, constant worry. I knew love alone could not fill an empty stomach. I wanted stability as well as passion. So once again I had to say no. "Majid," I told him softly, "you are wonderful, but I cannot build a family on only dreams. I need something more." He looked at me with tears in his eyes, and for weeks, I felt the weight of my decision. But deep inside, I understood that being married to Majid would not bring me peace. By the time I was 30, I had finished my studies and started a proper job in a library. Books surrounded me every day and I loved it. My parents were proud of me, but they worried too. They wanted me to be settled. Around that time I met Nabil. He was different from Majid. He was calm, polite, and very stable. He had a good job, a small apartment, and a serious plan for life. Everyone around me said, "Laila, he is perfect for you. Don't let this chance go." Nabil was gentle, and he treated me with respect. After a year of knowing each other, he invited me to dinner at his home. The table was full of food, candles were shining, and music played softly in the background. Then he stood up, handed me a small box with a ring inside and said, "Laila, I want to spend my life with you. Will you be my wife?" I froze. This was everything society told me I should want. A good man, security, a home, a future. I should have felt joy, but instead I felt something else, fear. I looked at him and thought, do I really love him? Or do I just love the idea of him? I realized that while Nabil was kind, my heart never beat faster with him. I liked him, yes, but love? The kind of love that makes you want to share every day of your life? No, it was not there. So I gave the ring back and whispered, "I am sorry, Nabil. Cannot say yes. You deserve someone who loves you with all her heart." He was hurt, but he respected my answer. After that, I started to wonder if maybe I was the problem. Why could I not say yes? Why was I always finding reasons to walk away? But each time I looked at women who married without love, I saw their sadness. Some of my friends cried in secret because their husbands did not respect them. Others gave up their dreams to raise children they were not ready for. I did not want that life. Still, there were lonely moments too. When I saw my friends with their babies, I felt a deep ache in my heart. When I heard children call their mothers, I thought, that will never be me. At weddings I smiled, but inside I sometimes wanted to run away. By my mid-30s, I had said no to 3 proposals. People talked behind my back. "Laila is too proud," they whispered. "She thinks no one is good enough for her." But that was not true. I respected those men. I simply wanted to marry for the right reasons, not because of pressure. Looking back now, I see that each proposal taught me something important. From Sammy, I learned that kindness is not enough if freedom is missing. From Majid, I learned that passion cannot survive without responsibility. From Nabil, I learned that security without love is empty. Each time I said no, I chose myself. I chose honesty. And though the path was lonely at times, I never regretted those choices. After 35, proposals stopped coming so often. Most men my age were already married. I was different, living in my small apartment, working in the library, and spending weekends with books or a few close friends. Sometimes I wondered, what if I had said yes to Sammy? Or to Majid? Or to Nabil? Maybe my life would have been easier. Maybe I would have children now, maybe a big family. But another part of me always whispered, "No, Laila. You would not be yourself. You would not be free." And so I continued walking my road, alone but true to my heart. By the time I was 40, my life was very different from the picture I once had as a young girl. Most of my friends were married, many had children who were already teenagers, and some were even becoming grandparents. When I met with them, they always had stories about family life, children's schools, family holidays, husbands who worked too much or not enough. I listened with interest, but I could not join in. My stories were different. I spoke about books I had read, trips I had taken, or the work I did in the library. Sometimes I felt proud of my life. Other times I felt like an outsider. I had built a small but comfortable life. I had my own apartment, filled with books, flowers, and little things I loved. I had a few close friends who respected me and never judged me for being unmarried. I worked every day at the library, and in the evenings I often cooked a simple meal, listened to music, or wrote in my diary. There was peace in my routine, but also silence. Silence can be beautiful, but when it lasts too long, it becomes heavy. It was during these years that I began to understand both the advantages and disadvantages of living without a husband. On one hand, I was free. I did not have to argue about daily things. I did not have to sacrifice my dreams for someone else's, and I had time to learn, read, and travel when I could. On the other hand, there were evenings when I longed for someone to share my thoughts with. There were mornings when I wished to wake up next to a warm smile. Life without marriage gave me space, but it also gave me loneliness. Around the age of 42, something unexpected happened. At the library where I had worked for many years, a new colleague arrived. His name was Hassan, and he was a widower. He was a quiet man in his late 40s, with gray beginning to show in his hair. His wife had died a few years earlier, and his 2 children were already grown. He loved books as much as I did, and soon we found ourselves talking every day, first about work, then about history, then about life. Hassan had a gentle way of speaking. He did not try to impress me with big words or promises. He simply listened and shared his own thoughts. Slowly, I began to enjoy his company more and more. For the first time in years, I felt that familiar spark of excitement when I saw someone walk into the room. After several months, Hassan invited me to dinner at his home. We ate together, talked for hours, and then he looked at me seriously and said, "Laila, I have spent many years alone. I know what it means to share a life, and I also know what it means to lose it. I do not want to spend the rest of my years in silence. You are a kind, intelligent woman. Will you marry me?" I was shocked. I had not expected his words, even though we had grown close. For a moment my heart beat faster. Here was a man who was mature, who understood life, who did not expect me to be young or perfect. A man who had already known love and loss, and who wanted companionship more than anything. It sounded like a good choice, maybe even the last real chance for me. But when I returned home that night, I sat in my chair and thought about his question. Marriage with Hassan would not be like a young love story. It would not be full of adventure or passion. It would be 2 older people sharing their days quietly. That might have been enough for many women, but I still asked myself, is this truly what I want? Or am I only afraid of being alone? The more I thought about it, the more I realized the answer. I respected Hassan and I cared for him, but I did not love him the way a wife should love a husband. I could not marry him just because I was afraid of silence. So the next day I met him and told him gently, "You are a wonderful man, Hassan, but I cannot marry you. It would not be fair to you or to me. I care for you as a friend, not as a wife." He was quiet for a long time, then he nodded. "I understand," he said softly. "I wish you happiness, Laila." We stayed friends for some time, but slowly we drifted apart. He later found another woman who accepted his proposal, and I was happy for him. Still, there were nights when I asked myself if I had made a mistake. As I moved into my late 40s and 50s, I noticed another change. People no longer asked me when I would marry. They had stopped expecting it. Instead, they looked at me with a kind of sadness, as if my story had already been written. At family events, I often sat with the older women, while the younger ones ran after their children. I smiled and listened, but I felt the distance between their lives and mine. During these years, I put even more energy into my work. I organized reading events at the library, taught children how to love books, and even started a small writing group. I traveled to a few countries, something I had always dreamed of. I saw new cities, walked through museums, and listened to different languages. Those were moments of pure joy, and I knew that if I had married young, I might never have had those experiences. But when I returned home from my travels, the same silence greeted me. There was no one waiting to ask me about my trip, no one to share the photographs with. Sometimes I filled the silence with music. Sometimes I simply sat and thought about the choices I had made. One evening, as I watched the sunset from my window, I realized something important. I had not refused marriage because I hated men or because I wanted to be different. I had refused because I wanted to live honestly. I wanted to give my heart fully, and if I could not do that, then I preferred to stay alone. My life was not perfect, but it was mine. By the time I turned 55, I was used to being the single woman. People no longer whispered about me. They simply accepted me as I was. Some even admired me for living by my own rules. A few younger women came to me for advice, asking, "How did you stay so strong when everyone expected you to marry?" I told them the truth, that strength does not mean never feeling lonely, but choosing the life that feels true to your heart. And so my story continued with days full of books, work, small joys, and quiet evenings. I did not have a husband, but I had myself, and I began to believe that was enough. When I turned 60, I noticed that time had begun to move in a different way. My hair was now almost completely gray, and small lines had appeared around my eyes. My body was slower, but my mind still loved to read and learn. Many of my friends were retiring, and some were becoming great-grandparents. Their lives were full of family visits, children's laughter, and noisy houses. My house was still quiet, sometimes too quiet. In the mornings, I often sat by the window with a cup of tea, watching the world outside. I thought about how quickly the years had passed. It seemed like only yesterday that I was a young girl dreaming of romance, then a woman working in the library, then someone refusing marriage proposals because her heart was not ready. Now here I was, an older woman, still unmarried, still alone. At this age, people no longer asked me about marriage. Instead, they asked about my health or whether I needed help with shopping. They saw me as an old woman, not as a woman who once had dreams and choices. That was hard. I wanted people to remember that I had lived a full life, not just that I was alone in old age. But life at 60 also gave me new gifts. I had more time for myself. I retired from the library, though I still visited often. I joined a local reading club, where we met once a week to discuss books. I also started writing small stories, not to publish, but to express my feelings. Writing helped me understand my own life better. Loneliness was still there, especially in the evenings. Sometimes I would sit in my chair, close my eyes, and imagine what life might have been if I had said yes to one of the men who proposed to me. Maybe I would have had children. Maybe I would have shared a lifetime of memories with someone. But then I reminded myself that love cannot be forced. If I had married without true love, maybe I would have lived with regret. At least now, I knew I had been honest with myself. When I turned 70, my body had grown weaker, but my mind was still alive. I took slow walks in the park, watching young couples push strollers and teenagers laugh together. Sometimes I felt invisible, as if the world had moved on and forgotten me. But other times I felt strangely free. No one expected anything from me anymore. I did not have to explain my choices. I could simply be myself. During these years, I also found joy in small things. The smile of a neighbor who helped me carry my groceries, the sound of birds in the morning, the warmth of the sun on my face. I learned that happiness does not always come from big things like marriage or children. Sometimes it comes from noticing the beauty that is already around you. I also grew closer to a few young women in my neighborhood. They came to me for advice, asking about life, work, and love. They told me I was wise, and that made me smile. I realized that even though I did not have children of my own, I could still guide and support others. Maybe that was another kind of motherhood, one that life had chosen for me. In my 70s, I spent more time thinking about death. Not in a sad way, but in a calm, honest way. I knew that my life was moving toward its end, as all lives do. I sometimes wondered who would stand by my grave, who would remember me. I did not have a husband or children, but I had friends, neighbors, and people I had touched through my work and kindness. That gave me peace. One evening, as I sat by the window watching the sunset, I whispered to myself, "Laila, you lived your life in your own way. You were not afraid to be different. You knew loneliness, but you also knew freedom. You made mistakes, but you never betrayed your heart." In that moment, I felt proud. Life without marriage was not easy, especially in a society that valued family so deeply. But it was my life. I had learned to find meaning in books, friendships, travel, and quiet reflection. I had learned that even when society does not understand you, you can still respect yourself. And so, as I grew older, I accepted my story as it was. Not perfect, not full of romantic love, but full of honesty and courage. I had chosen to live without lies, and that was enough for me. Now I am 79 years old. My days are quiet, and my body is not as strong as before. I move slowly, and I often need to sit and rest. Still, my mind is awake, and my heart is full of memories. Sometimes I wonder how almost 8 decades of life have passed. Sometimes I feel like the same young girl who once dreamed of love. At other times, I feel every year of my age. People often ask me if I regret not marrying. I think about this question a lot. The truth is not simple. There were moments when I wished I had said yes to one of the men who wanted to marry me. I imagine sitting beside someone in the evenings, holding his hand, talking about our day. I imagine children running in the house, laughing, crying, meeting me. I imagine grandchildren visiting, filling my home with life. Those are the things I did not have, and sometimes my heart feels heavy when I think about them. But then I also remember why I made my choices. I never wanted to marry just to escape loneliness. I wanted a true connection, a deep love, something that felt right. That love never came to me in the way I dreamed, and I was not willing to lie to myself. If I had married without love, maybe I would have been more lonely in a marriage than I was outside of it. So no, I do not regret being honest with myself. My life had many advantages even without marriage. I had freedom. I could decide how to spend my time, where to live, what work to do. I traveled when I wanted, I read for hours, I wrote stories that no one forced me to stop writing. I kept my independence, and I learned to rely on myself. Many married women I knew did not have this freedom. They had to take care of children and husbands before they could think about themselves. I respect them, but I also respect my own path. There were disadvantages too, of course. When I was sick, there was no husband to bring me water or sit by my bed. When I felt afraid at night, there was no one beside me. On holidays, when others gathered with their big families, I often sat alone with my thoughts. At times, loneliness felt like a heavy coat I could not take off. But then I reminded myself, every life has both joy and sorrow. Marriage does not protect people from sadness either. Many of my married friends face problems I never had. Some argued with their husbands for years. Some felt trapped. Some lost their husbands early and had to face loneliness anyway. What I learned is this: no life is perfect. My life was not perfect, but it was mine. I chose it with open eyes. I accepted the price of my freedom, and I accepted the gifts that came with it. Now at 79 I feel peaceful. I do not spend my days wishing for what I never had. Instead, I spend them remembering what I did have. I had good friends, some of them like sisters to me. I had a job I loved, surrounded by books that became my loyal companions. I had adventures, trips to new cities, nights filled with music, quiet mornings with tea and sunlight. I had small but precious joys, and I was present enough to notice them. That is what makes me proud. I also feel proud that I did not let fear control me. Many women of my time married because society expected it. Some were afraid of being called old maids. Some were afraid of being alone. I too was afraid sometimes, but I still walked my own road. I showed myself that it is possible to live without following everyone else. Maybe that is my small gift to the world. Sometimes young women come to me for advice. They tell me they are worried about not finding love, or about being single too long. They ask, "Laila, do you think I will be happy if I never marry?" I look at them, their eyes full of questions, and I tell them the truth. Happiness is not only in marriage. Happiness is in knowing yourself, respecting yourself, and building a life you can accept. If love comes, welcome it. If it does not, do not believe that your life has no meaning. Every life has meaning if you choose to live it with honesty. I tell them that love can come in many forms. It can be romantic, but it can also be friendship, kindness, or passion for something you create. I never had a husband, but I had love. I had the love of books, the love of writing, the love of laughter shared with friends, the love of the world itself. Those loves carried me through the years. Now, as I look at the end of my journey, I want to leave one message. Do not be afraid to live differently. Do not be afraid to say no when your heart does not agree. Do not be afraid of being alone. Life can still be rich and beautiful, even without the picture that society paints for you. Of course, there will be lonely nights. There will be moments when you wish things were another way. But there will also be mornings filled with light, with peace, with the quiet joy of knowing that your life belongs only to you. As for me, I am ready for whatever comes next. I have lived my years. I have faced both loneliness and freedom, both sadness and beauty. I have made mistakes, but I have also shown courage. I do not know how much time I have left, but I know that I will face it with open eyes, just as I always have. When I close my eyes for the last time, I hope people will not remember me as the woman who never married. I hope they will remember me as Laila, the woman who lived honestly, who chose her own way, and who found her own kind of love in a world that often told her she needed something else. That is my story. That is my truth. And now it is also my gift to you. As I sit here at 79 years old, looking back on all my years, I realize that my life was not less because I did not marry. It was simply different. People often think there is only one road to happiness: marriage, children, grandchildren. But I learned that there are many roads, and each one can carry beauty if you walk it with an open heart. I never wore a wedding dress, I never held a baby in my arms that was mine, and I never grew old beside a husband. But I still lived a life that was full in its own way. I laughed with friends until my stomach hurt. I cried over stories in books and films that touched me deeply. I walked through cities and forests and mountains, breathing in the world's wonders. I had freedom, peace, and time to discover myself. That was my treasure. Yes, there were lonely days. Sometimes I felt the emptiness of my quiet home. Sometimes I wished for a warm voice calling my name when I returned from work. Sometimes I longed for the comfort of a hand to hold in the dark. These were the shadows of my choice, and I learned to live with them. But I also saw that even people with families feel lonely. Loneliness is part of the human heart, not only the unmarried heart. What I want to say, especially to young people, is this: do not believe there is only one way to live. Some of you will marry young and have families. Some will marry later. Some will never marry at all. Some will find love in unexpected places. Whatever happens, do not measure your worth by someone else's story. Your life is your own story, and it is valuable. If you marry, let it be for love, not for fear. If you choose to stay single, let it be with pride, not shame. If you walk between those two choices, know that it is also fine. Happiness does not come from a title like wife or mother. It comes from honesty with yourself, from small joys, from kindness, from courage. As for me, I leave this story behind so that others may see there is another way. I do not want pity. I do not want people to think of me as incomplete. I want them to think, she lived her life with her own hands, she respected her heart, and she found meaning in her own way. That is enough for me. So if you are ever afraid of being alone, remember me, Laila. Remember that a woman can stand strong, live long, and smile at the end, even without a husband by her side. Life is not perfect, but it is precious, and every path walked with honesty can lead to peace.